yeah, so it's about time I reroll new characters and I want my leveling experience to be really good. As you can see in the introductions, this build pretty much kill all bosses in the game from start to finish, and the playstyle is one button for clear and it's very comfy. This build is incredible for leveling and it's worth for all classes, so personally I'm going to use it to level all my elves. As you can see here, this is the Act 3 cruel boss fight, and we'll just take a look at how much damage I'm doing to him. And you might say that, well, Monk is OP, but no, this is actually done on my witch character, and she haven't done any trial of ascendancy yet. So, as you can see, this build will perform well across all classes, and you don't even need ascendancies, right? And you can use the same gears for your next character as well. The only requirement is access to leveling uniques and some tier 3 support gems, some lesser jeweler orbs, so you will likely want to level this build on your second characters. And as you can see here, my character have completed the entire campaign in just under 10 hours, and I'm not a speedrunner by any means. This build is incredibly strong, allowing you to smoothly progress through the campaign from start to finish. I want to quickly start with a quick disclaimer before diving into the guide itself. So this build is not intended for endgame content, but instead it will help you level from 1 to 65 through the campaign as quickly as possible. Now, after reaching level 65, you want to respec to your design ascendancy and build. This would also cost you gold to respec, but then after the Linux patch, respecting with gold is a lot cheaper now, and if it's your second character, you wouldn't have any problem doing so at level 65. Now, to get started, you will need some currency to purchase the recommended leveling unique item as well, and it will cost you around 10 exalted ore. The good news is that the build and the gear you acquire can be reused for your next character, making it essentially free for your 3rd, 4th, and 5th character should you choose to crit more. I do also want to mention that there will be a written guide on Mobiledex detailing the step-by-steps on how to level with this build. The written guide will cover everything we'll talk about in this video and more in written format should you prefer to read instead. So I'll put the link in the descriptions of this video, and well, this video is showcasing with the witch class, but I have also set up the passive tree for all 12 ascendancies, so just pick the one you're going to start with. The guide will always be the most up-to-date should you find any discrepancy between the video and the written guide. This is because we'll continue to discover new things as we explore more of the game, and if I find anything else to add, I'll add them in the written guide. Let's talk about how to set up this build with me going over the mandatory and optional unique items. So the first item that makes this build possible, and it's the Pillar of the Cage God. Now, if you've seen all the attribute stackers, you know how strong this item is, and yes, we'll be using it in this build to destroy everything in the campaign. The only line that we care about on this weapon will be the 10% increased weapon damage per 5 strengths. And we'll, stack a lot of strengths in the early game, so as a matter of fact, most of our passive skill points will be allocated into attributes and will be taking strength, which make this build possible on all class. This is some very cheap unique items, and if you got some extra money, I would suggest getting one with Corrupted Implicit, adding flat damage like what I'm using. And for the rune, you should suck it in the lightning damage. For the next 2 mandatory items, they are both helmet, and they are the Greyback and Black Sun Crest. And you'll be using Greyback from level 5 until level 30, and for the rest of the campaign, you'll be using Black Sun Crest. Both of them provide plenty of stats earlier into the game to help with your attributes and giving a tons of early game damage. So Greyback will fall off at level 30, which is when you transition into using Black Sun Crest. They are both strong, cheap, and Greyback is around 1x, and Black Sun Crest with a high shrink roll is probably about 2 to 3x. You don't need perfect roll on these items, and I'll say that these two are not mandatory just like the weapon, but they're really cheap and strong enough to just pick it up and use early, so I highly recommend getting it. The last mandatory items is Enfolding Dawn, which is a good body armor that provides 100 spirits. Now, this will allow you to use elemental invocation spirit gems early into the game around Act 3, which will help with one-shotting bosses together with Tempest spell. There's not really any use for it before getting elemental invocation though, so which is why I recommend getting Fogshade as your optional early game body armor. Now, this body armor will provide you with all the dexterity requirements you need in the early games, And in order to use it in town right from level 2, you want to use it together with Wings of Kaelin, because this helmet gives you some initial dex for snapshotting and equipping the Fog Shades. There are some other optional unique that give you early game damage in Act 1 and 2, and to be honest, it's not really necessary because you will eventually get better raid gears, but I'll list them here anyway. Meginord Girdle is the belt that will probably last you the longest time, giving 40 to 50 strength, which is a big boost to this particular build in the early game because, you know, we're stacking shrinks. Blackheart gives flat damage and life regen, which is also very good in the early game, particularly Act 1. Northpaw also give flat damage in the early games, and so, you know, if you really want to destroy Act 1 and 2, you can get all of these items I mentioned. The last item I want to talk about is Wanderlust, and it's an extremely strong early game unique item that provides 20% increased movement speed. If you have played the campaign before, you know that maybe 60 to 70% of the campaign is just walking around, so having movement speed is like a cheat code. Our build is already so strong and we are stacking strength, so we are naturally tankier than most other builds. Personally, I leveled with Wanderlust from the beginning all the way to the end of the campaign, and it felt great. Throughout the campaign, you will probably pick up some rare items as upgrades, so I'll quickly go over what stats are worth keeping and replacing your optional unique items. First of all, attribute stats are always good, but if you find any old attributes, ints or dex stats, you'll probably want to keep them because later on in the campaign, when you get higher level, you will need higher ints and dex to equip and upgrade some of your gems. Of course, if you run into attribute problems, just respect the point on your passive skill trees to match the requirements. Beside the attribute stats, you'll want flat added damage, whether it's, you know, physical, cold, lightning, fire, doesn't really matter as we can use all of it. Ideally, you'll get these upgrades on the gloves and rings. Life and resistance is also good, but like I mentioned before, will naturally be tanky from all those strength notes, so at least in the campaign, you will be safe. Yeah, so that should wrap up the gear sections. Now, like I mentioned before, I'll have the passive skill tree set up for all the classes already, but I'll quickly go over them, at least for this which class, so you understand what are some of the important key takeaway that you can do and make the, you know, and even make the adjustment for yourself to fit more for your build in the end game, so you don't have to do a lot of respect. The key is that you want to take pretty much all the attribute traveling notes, and they're all extremely strong, so you will end up destroying the game by just taking all these notes and add +5 to them. The first checkpoint that you want is to grab the Resonant Keystone over here, right at level 31, when you get your Charge Staff skill. Now, this is for you to gain power charge and basically become Death Mode, but I'll explain about that later. And after getting the Resonant Keystones, and depending on where you are in the tree, you can follow the pathing listed in a written guide, as it's a little bit different for every class. But, you know, even if you were to just take the Resonance and grab all the attribute notes for strengths, it will probably work just as good, so don't worry too much about it. The TLDR is basically the passive skill trees. You beeline to Resonant Keystone at level 31, and then you grab as much strength as possible, and, you know, lightning damage notes, and some other attribute notes like dexterity and int. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the passive skill trees. Alright, next I'll go over how to level with the spell, what's the skills, rotation will be in the campaign. It's actually pretty straightforward, and, you know, basically consider that we'll have an early game setup that will cover the level 1 to 30, which will be roughly Act 1 and most of Act 2. This is where we will slowly transition into our Stormway setup for the endgame, and we'll fully come online at level 31 after getting our Charge Staff. So right in the beginning, in Act 1, from the town, you will cut your first skill gem to be Falling Thunder. Then you can socket these gems with the Martial Temples and Lightning Infusions as the support gems for the skills. It's a very good skills that deal great damage, and basically it's a melee slam attack that deals damage in a cone in front of you. You can ignore the power charge portions because we don't have any way of generating charge right now, and, you know, just had to know that the skill hit like a truck and should trivialize the early game at least. We'll be using this all the way until we get a skill gem level 5, which then we'll briefly swap over to Ice Strike. Now, Once you have Ice Strike, you can support it with Martial Temple and Crescendo. Crescendo is actually very important, so make sure you try to get it. Then you will use this together with Tempest Spell, which is a skill that you unlock from level 6, but we didn't have any way to utilize it until now. You can put Fawn of Rage and Overabundance into your belt for extra belt and extra rage for bosses and rares. Ice Strike is a melee attack that have a short dash animation attack to the target, so it's quite comfy. And the main reason why we're using this is because it can generate combo, and we can use the combo points to drop the Tempest spell and basically help us melt bosses. You want to drop the belt close to the boss, ideally in front or between, and then you'll be able to cleave both the belt and the boss to do the most damage possible. Actually, before I forget to mention, but after killing the King of the Mist in Act 1, you will also get an uncut Spirit Gems, which you should cut Herald of Thunder, and you can support it with Innovate and Elemental Focus. Now, you won't get to use it up until Act 2, and starting from level 22, once you get a Skill Gems level 7 to drops, and then you can cut Storm Wave to replace Ice Strike entirely. You should use a Lesser Jewel Orb on the skills, as it will be our main clear skill for the rest of the campaign. The support gem will be Upheaval, which is the most important one because it's allows you to shoot out 3 waves instead of 1, just like you see in the background here. The other 2 support gems will be Martial Temple and Primo Armament. Storm Wave will actually shotguns if you're standing close enough to the enemy, so it does pretty good single target damage. And again, Upheaval is the tier 3 support gems, which is why I suggest this should be your second characters. And Storm Wave, when used together with Herald Thunders, will amplify your players by a lot at this level. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Act 2. And going into Act 3, somewhere around level 31, you can cut the level 9 skill gems to get Charge Staff. And with my setup, you will permanently have it up. So you will support Chest Staff with Persistent, Conk Effect, and Conductions. Then you also swap the link for Storm Wave to include Electrocute, Upheaval, and Martial Temple. Now with electrocuting support for Storm Wave, we'll be able to electrocute enemies. And if you don't know what is Electrocute, it's basically a 5-second stun, which is extremely strong. But you're wondering, how do we get Power Charge for Chest Staff? Well, now we'll use Combat Frenzy buff, and the say is that you gain a Frenzy Charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy, which means by just attacking with Storm Wave, you will get many Frenzy Charge. Conveniently enough, we also spec into Resonance, which means that we are going to gain Power Charge instead of Frenzy Charge, so just by running around killing mobs, you will always have maximum Power Charge. And that's pretty much your AoE clear for the rest of the campaign. You will use Storm Wave to clear, and you will activate Charge Staff. So anyway, after that setup, we'll talk about the single target damage setup, which will include elemental invocations. So you can cut it from an uncut Spirit Gems at level 8, and you should also use a Lesser Jewel Orb on it. So you will support it with Ball Lightning, Scatter Shots, and Decelerations. Then you will cut Tempest Flurry as well, and support it with Practice Combo and Crescendo. Together with Tempest Belt, this will be our primary single target damage. And I want to note that this rotation will mainly be used for bosses only because Storm Wave will destroy the rest of the contents. The single target damage rotation will be using Tempest Flurry to build up combos. Then you will drop the bells in front of the boss, and while holding down Tempest Flurry to attack, you will quickly spam press Tempest Spell, Elemental Invocation, to send out multiple Ball Lightning, multiple bells, and this will ring the bell and the boss will actually just melt. It's important to note that in order to run all this buff and aura, you will need to equip the Enfolding Dawn body ammo, which I mentioned before. This provides 100 spirit, which is exactly what we need. Anyway, I'll be using this exact setup to level up all the classes, and the setup kind of reminds me of Hollow Palm in PoE 1, which is also an attribute stacker, and it was like a golden standard for leveling build. Overall, I think this build is pretty good because it doesn't require you to swap weapon, innately tanky, and works right out of the gate from level 1. So have fun if you want to try it out and level your ult during the holidays. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.